Mrs. Marilyn Rhie of Wilbraham was at first unsure whether she would be interesting television material. Mrs. Rhie is an artist. She has a degree in Oriental art, teaches at Smith College, and as we're about to see, she proved to be a very interesting person.
Mrs. Rhie has been painting since she was a child, although now her love for art is not only shown through her own paintings, but in her study of Oriental art history. Presently, she is a professor at Smith College. She has traveled to Russia, Japan, Korea, Nepal, and Pakistan. She now lives in Wilbraham with her husband and daughter.
Well, my style of painting is more or less realistic. It always has been realistic, except about in the last 10 or 15 years, it's been greatly influenced by the Oriental style of painting, particularly Chinese painting, either by format or by the idea of capturing the mood of the landscape. In this particular one, I'm studying the tree, which is outside our window here, a pine tree, which has a kind of Oriental look to it because of the directions of the branches and the sparseness of the tree and so on. This is a kind of study, a technical study for a larger painting.
Okay, what subjects do you like to paint?
Well, I prefer to paint landscape paintings, although when I was younger, I studied figure painting and still life painting and so on. But these days I'm most anxious to paint landscapes or studies of particular items such as old trees or rocks or flowers, usually just pieces of scenery that I see around me every day. And for instance, recently I did this set of 4 seasons just from views around our own house here, so that I tried to capture the mood of each of the 4 seasons just as I see it here in our yard. So right now I'm concentrating primarily on landscapes.
Okay, could you show us or explain to us what each of them means? Or?
Well, I started painting with autumn and then did winter and spring and summer. And it was an Oriental idea. Actually, the idea for these is Chinese. For centuries in Chinese painting, they have doing what is called sets of the 4 seasons. So from my studies of Oriental art history, I learned this Chinese idea for painting the moods of the 4 landscapes and having them displayed as a complete set. All of them would be shown together. So I decided to try that kind of painting just from the views I see around here. So that's why I produced these 4 that hang here in the room as a set, like the Oriental style.
What would cause you to paint something?
Usually I react to something I see in the landscape, the way the sun hits the trees or certain type of combination of various types of fruit trees or pine trees or something like this. Usually it's an emotional reaction to some kind of element that I see in nature, or else it gives me some idea, perhaps stimulated also from my studies in Chinese painting, the idea plus what I see, and then I start to formulate the organization and composition for the landscape painting.
Okay. You started painting when you were a child?
Well, more or less. I'm not certain of the exact age. I always did like to draw as a child and color and paint, as children do, but seriously, I think I began sometime around 10 years old when my mother gave me a set of oil paints. And as a matter of fact, I first started painting landscapes. And I think I experimented with those for a while. Then I thought I would try human figures. And when I went to Middlebury and Skowhegan, I was concentrating on primarily still lifes and the human figure, so that I did branch out into some other types of painting. For instance, this is the painting I did of the self-portrait, one of the first studies I did of my own self-portrait. And I have done also the sketches of my husband. This was later, a later drawing, but I did do quite a bit of drawing and painting of Western-style human figures. But these days it's mainly landscape. And I have one painting here from the period I went to Skowhegan, where I was studying still lifes and whatnot. This is the painting of just vases and lemons and pots and so on. But this is an oil painting from the period when I was really doing Western style.
Why do you prefer landscapes instead of people art?
At the moment, probably there's no particular reason, except landscapes are readily available to me, whereas people, you have to kind of get your husband or your daughter or son to sit for you. But there's another reason also, probably, and that is I've discovered from my studies of Chinese painting that you can express almost any idea you would like, any profound idea, through landscape. Now, in the West, we have a tradition for figure painting. Most of our philosophical ideas have been portrayed through figure painting, rather realistic figure painting. But in the Orient, their profound ideas are expressed through landscape, through trees and mountains and waterfalls and so on. And the human figure was never a major or prime subject, except for a very short period, maybe the 8th century. So I've discovered that you can treat a tree just like a human being. In other words, the tree becomes a portrait almost just like a human being, and it's the same essence that all humans and all trees and all nature has anyway. So it can be expressed even through a simple, a humble piece of landscape, as well as through the human figure. But I don't think I've abandoned it entirely. I would like to go back and try some other human figure paintings, particularly my young daughter. I would like to try to paint fairly soon if she'll sit still for me.
One of the paintings Mrs. Rhie has done is a view from her house painted on a Chinese hand scroll.
The whole scroll is 118 inches long, and it ends at exactly the same point where it began, with the iris seed pod sticking out of the snow.
So it's a 360 degree.
Yes, all around the house, yes.
Do you exhibit your paintings?
No, I don't, and I never have. Except when I was a student at Middlebury, there was perhaps some small exhibit there, but not really as a professional painter. I just paint for myself or for my friends. I do give away my paintings. My mother has, for instance, quite a number of mine. But I don't really paint to sell them, and I have never exhibited as a professional. So in a way, it has something of the idea also of the Chinese scholar gentleman who does paint for his own expression of his own ideas, but usually not as a professional painter.
How does the Oriental style of painting differ with the Western style?
The particular one does have some color in it, but it is essentially the control of the brush, which is the hallmark of the Oriental style painting, which is completely different from the Western style, where we put on many layers of paint usually to create the impression. But in the Orient, it is kind of a one-stroke painting. In other words, once the stroke is down, you cannot change it. You cannot put on more and obliterate it, so that you must make it perfect the first time. Otherwise, it will always show. The mistake would always show. So it shows great skill, and one has to know in his mind what he's doing before he puts it down, because there's no way of erasing or obliterating a mistake in a Chinese painting.
Okay. Why aren't you a professional painter?
Well, as I told you, I was thinking perhaps to be a painter, because that's what I like to do best. So I decided when I went to college that I should study Western art history, because that would deepen my knowledge of painting and perhaps improve my painting as well. So I was going to major in Western art history. And then I began to look at some Chinese and Oriental paintings in the museums and became greatly intrigued by them. and wanted to study the meaning and significance of that completely different, really, civilization and the civilization that produced these kind of paintings. So I began to study more and more of the Eastern painting, and the more I got into it, the more I liked it. And at the same time, I began to be interested in research, scholarly research, so that I decided, well, perhaps the best thing is to be a teacher or researcher or scholar, and to have painting as a hobby. And I have learned a lot for my painting from my deeper research studies in Oriental art. But I decided to become a teacher for a profession. The art profession is a little bit difficult, I think, to make a living as a professional painter. And I thought, for my own satisfaction, as a hobby, it would be best, and let me be a teacher for a profession.